Once again, thank you for joining us today. I'd like to take some time to introduce Ikigai Nairobi, who is our host for today. Ikigai is a collective of wellness-focused co-working spaces in Nairobi, based in Westlands, Lavington, Lokabete, and Riverside. They provide shared and private workspaces for individuals, teams, and startups and businesses of all sizes. At Ikigai, you can find beautiful and safe work environments for individuals, creatives, startups, SMEs, and corporates, and their membership take the hustle out of the day-to-day of running an office. Their spaces are intentionally designed to provide you and your team with flexible business models to stay agile in today's ever-changing environment. If you'd like to know more about Ikigai, please visit their website at ikigai.co.ke. Or for more information, please do reach out to the team, also on the same website. Now, on to the reason why we're all here. After the discussions at COP26, there's been a big urgency for us to start thinking about sustainable ways to develop. Although the conversation seemed to be removed from us all, the more that we think about it, we really need to find ways that are inclusive, that factor in climate change, and also create sustainable ways for us to develop in the long term. As such, one industry that affects each and every one of us is the energy industry. It's conversations around how we think about energy consumption, about inclusion through access to energy, affects us all, because together we develop as a nation. So today's event will focus on the different ways that the energy industry can evolve and has evolved in the last 20 years to be more inclusive, to provide people with energy access in rural areas, but also the innovations and the funding opportunities that are within the industry for the industry to continue growing. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to our amazing panel. I think we'll start with Wanji, who will give us a brief introduction about herself and the organization that she works for before we get into the meat of the subject. Over to you, Wanji.
Thanks, Stephanie. By way of introduction, my name is Wanji Nganga. I lead Shell Foundation's work in the region here in East Africa. Just a brief case of what we do. So we fund entrepreneurs that are working within the nexus of energy, agri, and mobility. We've been in the sector for the last 20 years, working on off-grid energy, and more recently, the last about 5 to 6 years, working and trying to solve for mobility. It's a pleasure to be here.
Happy to have you with us, Wanji. Next, I would like to introduce Andrew. The floor is yours.
Good afternoon, or is it good evening, everybody? And thank you for this introduction and opportunity. My name is Andrew Amadi, and I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the Kenya Renewable Energy Association, which is a business member organization that brings together all practitioners, professionals, companies that have an interest or a stake in any aspect of renewable energy. At the moment, the key focus areas is in the growth of the sector, and we're looking at e-mobility as one area of potential growth, as well as the productive use of renewable energy for economic growth and improved livelihoods. Thank you.
Hey, thank you so much. I think you've already peeked into some of the points that we'll be discussing later today, but good. It's a nice preview. Over to you, Choka.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Choka Cansteiner. I'm the CEO at GridX Africa, which is a commercial and industrial solar developer and financier. And I think we're staying within sort of the theme that Andrew and Wanji started with on areas of growth, and as we look forward, I think we're looking at the distributed energy space as a growing and broadening sort of sector. And so I think while we've done C&I projects and things in the past, I think we're taking a broader view to distributed energy as a wider field of assets.
Great, thank you so much. Over to you, Professor De Silva.
Sorry, thank you very much, Stephanie. So I'm called Da Silva. My position is I am the Deputy Vice Chancellor Research and Innovation in Strathmore University. We started something here called CERC, Strathmore Energy Research Center, which does consultancy, research, standards, quality, and training for solar systems. Yeah, we have a lab that also does a bit of testing. Then together with Andrew Amadi, we started an association called IPEA, Association of Energy Professionals Eastern Africa. And also I am the chair of the board of director of the Kenya Climate Innovation Center, which is based here in Strathmore, but it is a project supported by DANIDA and the European Union. And together with the NEL Foundation, I am committed to help Africa to achieve the 7 SDG number 7, which is access to affordable and clean energy. I think that's will do for now. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah. And last but not least is Patrick.
Yeah, good evening, everybody, and thank you so much for the invite to be part of this discussion. My name is Patrick Tonui. I lead the policy and regional work for GOGLA. GOGLA is the Global Industry Association for the community that's involved in off-grid energy, which is reaching really people who are living without access to the grid. And our members are both the developers or the companies that develop products, as well as distribute and sell those products, those who serve or invest in the companies in this area, as well as provide the other services to support the sector. And we are also a proud member of the Ikigai community now. I think we're going to 2 years now. Surprisingly, I never would have thought, but yes, thank you so much for this opportunity, Stephanie.
Of course, we're happy to have all of you on the panel, and each from such diverse fields, but I think we'll start from the basics. So what exactly is off-grid energy, and is it interchangeable with renewable energy, or is it a subset of renewable energy? Anybody can jump in. I think we'll start with Andrew.
Okay, the benefits of being the first letter of the alphabet.
Definitely.
I would say the simple answer would be no. Off-grid energy is not synonymous with renewable energy. If we were to be very pedantic, then we would say that off-grid is anything that is not on a centralized grid. So that basically opens up all other uses for energy. So as Professor Da Silva said, we started the Association of Energy Professionals Eastern Africa. I think that was almost 8 years ago. And what these professionals do is a lot of energy management. So you always start with a pie chart. And the pie chart is what is the total energy that is being consumed within whatever parameters you have created as your boundary. And I look at everything. If it's a house, for example, then you will look at the grid electricity, you will look at the cooking, you look at the transport, and anything that's not on the grid, then you can be able to call it off grid. So when you do that, then you get a big problem of you discover soon enough that majority of the energy that we use is not necessarily electricity, which gets majority of the attention. So that's how I would start the discussion on off-grid energy.
Great. I'm going to hand it over to Choka, who you said with GridX, it is part of what you do. So would you say the two terms are interchangeable, or how would you describe off-grid energy compared to renewable energy?
Yeah, I think it's something we probably spend a good deal of time explaining to our clients and investors. And in our case, most of our clients are commercial entities, and some of them are off-grid. So some of them will be using diesel generation and will install solar and battery systems to become their primary power supply. But oftentimes you can be doing renewable energy projects in the C&I space that are grid tied or behind the meter. So these will be customers that are connected to the grid using the grid power as their primary supply, and then when they integrate solar into their energy mix, primarily they're using solar usually for their daytime supply, and then they'll often use the grid at night, and sometimes have battery systems that could allow them to island off of the grid. And I think we're seeing more and more people opting to have that functionality to be fully independent, to use solar and battery systems to create a level of energy security or reliability if they experience grid instability. But no, I think, you know, the solar industry, particularly in Kenya and globally, is, you know, there's so many different slices of the sort of, I guess, value chain and the size and scale at which you're talking. So at the largest scale, you know, renewable energy projects that feed into the grid, you know, can be 50, 100 megawatts, which are really sort of high capex, large scale projects, with sort of C&I projects being more in the medium size. And then there's mini grids, which probably would be considered off grid, and are sort of isolated, standalone, I guess, smaller grids. And then there's solar home systems and pico lanterns. And so there's lots of different layers in terms of the size spectrum of what comprises, I guess, the renewable energy space here. I think maybe the definition of off-grid is, although sometimes misunderstood, maybe apt, in my opinion, to where the industry is going in the future, in that I think we're seeing more non-conventional approaches to energy solutions, which are obviously, you know, often at this point geared towards sustainability, taking off. And so, Andrew, I think you mentioned it some around like energy efficiency and how that plays into the mix, and different forms of energy that are non-electrical forms of energy. I think, you know, the greatest amount of energy is provided by wood or charcoal in Kenya compared to electricity. So I think there's big portions of you know, non-grid energy solutions that are going to be a part of the future, and a part of the, I guess, this distributed energy movement, which I think is maybe a more aptly named catch-all for the segments that are represented by the people here, at least.
I think you mentioned two very important points. So one, you touched on energy security and reliability, but also just talking about how big the renewable energy space in Kenya is. And I think starting with how the industry is locally, for us to just give it some sort of context would be really great. So I know each of you has different experience in the industry, but what developments have you seen in the previous years that you think are insights or foreshadowing what is to come in the renewable energy space? I think a great person to ask is Patrick, because with policy, what changes have been in the space that have facilitated the growth of the industry, for example?
All right, I think that's an interesting question, and I think you're tying it back to your previous question. So we as GOGLA, our legal name and how we were registered when we were founded in 2012 was the Global Off-Grid Lighting Association. And at that point in time, it was really about providing lights to people. And making sure that the communities who are off-grid have access to a decent lighting source, which was solar lanterns and solar home systems. But as the industry has developed, as we've understood more about customer needs around their energy, we, for example, on GOGLA, moved away from the name from Global Off-Grid Lighting Association to GOGLA because we realized when you look at what our members are doing and what we're providing and enabling in the communities was, yes, first basic lighting, but we were now providing energy where we started out was phone charging, powering a television, and more increasingly it's moved to doing other things, and then beyond that, the ecosystem that's developed. So you asked, so what are the innovations and changes in the industry? 10 years ago, it was very much about replacing the kerosene lantern and providing a reliable lighting product at a price point and in the size and usability that the consumer, who for us primarily is living in a rural off-grid community, typically will be lower income. So it was about the solar lanterns. And then as the technology developed, as battery technology improved, lithium ion became possible, we are now being able to offer lighting solutions for their homes. So which is a system with 3 lights, with 4 lights, with 5 lights, and even beyond if you go to component systems. So now we've gone from just basic what we'd call task lighting, which is you've got a lantern, which is like a torch that they can use in the kitchen or whatever, to now you'll be able to power their homes. Then beyond that, you see now the sector is not only is now enabling the other things that we enjoy when we look at when you've got access to energy, which is they can run their TVs, they no longer have to trek kilometers to charge their phones, they can do it in their houses. We are seeing them now also being able to do more and more things as which is now, I think, today the greatest innovation or opportunity in our space is to power economic opportunities, which is what Andrew has touched with. So what do we mean there? We're seeing that maturization in technologies that will allow people to have, instead of an engine to run a mill, a posho mill, which is to grind maize in, or things like that, to be able to use systems like that. We're seeing in Lake Victoria, and we saw this, for example, in Tanzania, where kerosene in fishing lanterns has been virtually replaced with solar lanterns for fishing. You're seeing things like chicken incubators, which are able to run off of solar systems. And when you go to the micro and small enterprises, you're seeing more and more shops now that, for example, can have a small fridge to provide cool drinks or keep things like milk from being spoiled. If you look at, for example, how popular things like TVs are, football are in most of African countries in Kenya. And if you really go to rural areas, everybody's still convinced at their town center or small shopping center to watch the football games. It's the solar systems that are allowing those small youth businesses to power those TVs. So we're seeing that transition from basic lighting to lighting that enhances their services or the experience they can enjoy in their homes, now towards enabling economic opportunities for them to be able to to see an income improvement in their quality of life and these other things. And around all this is these innovations, for example, around financial inclusion, leveraging things like mobile money that allows them to pay and charge their buy tokens and things like that. And we are seeing now other companies come into that space that is enabling things. We've seen, and I'll wrap up here, for example, in the agriculture space, the companies that are providing solar irrigation are now trying to add on top of that other services, so extension services, because you have communities where you give a farmer water, but then if they don't have the right seed, they don't have the right technology to be able to see what's going on in their crop, and at the end, they don't see the return that they want, that more and more services are being having to come in to support what's enabled by these energy systems to really transform the lives of the communities we're serving.
I think that's a really good point, and I think a very big one to mention. We are seeing a lot larger scale projects, from just the solar lamps, which we saw before, to now having projects, for example, like the Strathmore Energy Research Center. And I think we'll hold to Professor De Silva to actually give a bit more insight on what they do there and how it's actually contributing to the growth of the industry locally. So with the trainings, and also I know one big innovation was the solar panels at the lab. How has that impacted the industry locally, or what are you seeing from the lab, and what positive changes can you share with us?
Thank you very much, Stephanie. Yeah, CERC, Strathmore Energy Research Center, it started about 7 years ago. And we have trained over these 7 years about 3,500 professionals on solar energy, engineers, technicians. And what we do is we work with the government so that we design syllabus for training. Then we send it to NITA, National Industrial Training Authority, for validation. They also gazette it, ask for comments. And after they approve it, we send our CVs of the people training, and then they authorize us to train. And there is even a government structure to refund. Say if Stephanie sends 10 of her engineers or technicians to do the training in CERC, she can get refund from that money that she used to train those people. So it has been quite a humbling experience, because we began small, but now working with NIT and with IPRA, we have been offering our services of, as I mentioned, research, consultancy, training, and also quality and standards to 10 countries around. We, for instance, have of late been training people in Somalia, people of the private sector, to gather themselves together and to start a kind of a utility there. Yeah, but also South Sudan, Ethiopia, Mali, Uganda, Tanzania, Rwanda. So it is very interesting that solar energy, the industry has grown quite a bit because of the capacity building. You see, if Stephanie wants to give to her mother a solar system, she lives up country, and then she gives her a solar system, but then the next technician that can repair that thing is like 100 kilometers away. She's in trouble. Mom is in trouble. Yeah, so we actually partnered with 25 technical training institutions around the Kenyan geography, and we actually trained 2 from each of those institutions, and also we got money from GIZ and the USAID that we were able to give them hands-on training, just like the ones we have here in Strathmore. And it was very nice. They did TOT, and we got actually more than close to 2,000 people being trained in this fashion. And then it was so successful and so nice that we want to do it again, picking up the top 10, and now TTI or like Polytechnic or Sigalagal, etc., and then see where they are and how they could come to be very well prepared to train people around there. Yeah. Then another thing that you mentioned is the solar system. We have a 0.6 megawatt solar system on our roof. It is there since 2014. That is now how much, 7 or coming to 8 years. And it has helped us quite a bit to reduce the cost of electricity that we're paying, like close to 2.5 million per month. Yeah, so now we pay much less, and we also got ourselves registered as a independent power producer, and we actually dispatch power to the utility during the day, because the size of the system is 600 kilowatt, and our peak consumption is close to 350. So we actually have been dispatching power to the utility under the feed-in tariff dispensation. And I must tell you, I'm grateful to Kenya Power. They have paid me very religiously every quarter. So we are happy with that. And we hope that we want to add 400 kilowatt more to make it 1 mega, which is the maximum size for the feed-in tariff dispensation. So solar is very good. I keep preaching, go solar for health and wealth, and it would be a shame if I were not to use what I preach. So I preach and I use. So that is it. And I feel this is the future. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really love the health as well, and solar is the future. And part of that is, of course, the financing aspect. So I'm pretty sure how SEC came about is because you mentioned a few partners that have come on board. And the same with the policy, you know, we can always talk the talk, but you need somebody to help you back it up and walk the walk. So Wanji from the Shell Foundation, I'd love to know how you, as the organization, the Shell Foundation, entered the industry, and what your thoughts are on where the future of energy is going, specifically to the off-grid energies.
Right, okay. So with regards to what it is we solve for as a foundation, we come in fairly early stage. We often would provide grants capital to the entrepreneurs that are inside of our portfolio. And many times the grant financing is used for testing new business models, expanding into new markets, getting entrepreneurs to validate a lot of the hypotheses that they have. With regards to the space that we're in and for how long we've worked, so we've worked in the space for, like I said, about 20 years. I want to say we were one of the earlier entrants into the sector. And a lot of the companies that we've funded have grown on either to graduate from our portfolio or, to raise massive amounts of funding, which is something that, we're very excited to see. Aside from working with entrepreneurs that are solving for household energy challenges, we've also more recently expanded our portfolio to start to think about other pieces, other entrepreneurs that are solving for other pieces of the pie. So for example, organizations that are solving for productive uses of energy. We have folks in our portfolio that are working on solar irrigation, for example, solar refrigeration. And we also have another piece on our access to energy portfolio where we're specifically focused on off-grid utilities. I think it's important to mention that entrepreneurs are not the only layer of folks that would fund. So we'd fund entrepreneurs, and that makes the bulk of it. But we also work with enablers. So folks like GOGLA are enablers and have been part of our portfolio. We see folks, there's obviously a very important piece that enablers can be able to drive that can grow the sector. Lastly, we also finance funders. We have, in some instances, led or participated in funds specific to the off-grid solar space. More recently, I think we have just launched the Energy Entrepreneurs Growth Fund in partnership with a couple of other folks. A couple of years, right when we're getting into COVID, there was the Energy Access Relief Fund, etc. So that's in terms of what we're doing as Shell Foundation. We're coming in early, we're coming in young, but the capital that we give is not sufficient. There's need for obviously debt funders of different profiles. There's need for equity funders of different profiles. And there have been different profiles of these types of funding. I think a majority of the debt financing has been dominated by impact funders and DFIs. One of the things that I've been excited to see is a lot more crowdfunding coming into the debt space. So that's very exciting to see. And then equity also has traditionally been, a large part of financing, but I think with COVID, there was the numbers there, a little bit of a reduction. In totality, there's financing in the sector. Is it sufficient, or is it everything that needs to be sold for? Absolutely not. What I think is going to happen, so generally speaking, I see a lot more capital coming into the sector. The more we have conversations like this, the more we participate in global conversations with regards to COP, etc. I see more financing coming into the sector in different forms. It's exciting, especially if we start to think about more curated instruments for the different sectors that we work. That makes me very, very excited. I see pieces, and you can see it now, pieces of climate funding and financing being sold for. There's platforms, there's funders that are specifically coming into the market with that climate financing. I think there's even a couple of open funds that are available in the market right now.
Great. I think you mentioned working with enablers. I wanted to learn from you, Andrew and Patrick, how the Kenyan government has been involved in championing for renewable energy solutions and trying to make it more accessible to everybody. I think we'll start with Andrew. Great. Yeah, go.
Okay. I think the government has largely been supportive of initiatives to develop renewable energy, starting from adjustments to the policy instruments coming from the two angles, from the energy side, on the energy policy, but also coming from the environmental side in terms of the commitments to, say, international agreements. Like now there is the national determined contributions to reduce CO2 emissions by 32% before 2030. I think that has greatly helped with the uptick, particularly here talking about renewable energy. But we would also not forget the Kenya National Electrification Strategy that in 2018 included off-grid electricity at different tiers. So the minimum tier of acceptable definition of connectivity being at least having access to 4 hours of electricity a day. So it's a starting point. And this position not only increased the numbers, but also created an enabling environment for the off-grid market to grow. Still computing the numbers, but I think if what we have is correct, and I have no reason to believe that it is not correct, then Kenya's electrification is probably one of the fastest ever anywhere in the world, where we've gone from 23% in 2013 to now over or somewhere hovering around 80% of the population having some level of access to electricity. Consider that this has happened in the last, let's just say 15 to 20 years, more so in the last 6-7 years is when there's been an acceleration with the uptake of the pay-as-you-go systems, that half of those who are connected, or 25% of the connections being off-grid, compared to the 50% that has taken 100 years to connect. So this is a monumental year in Kenya in terms of anniversaries. Kenya Power is turning 100 years old, and KEREA is also turning 20 years old. So in these timelines, when we do introspection and reflection, then we can be able to see the impact that has happened over this period of time. And part of it, a lot of it, is because of the enabling environment, but it is also because of what some have referred to as the peculiar nature of Kenya that has driven this. And I would be remiss to say that even before the pay-as-you-go systems, there was already and has been a very vibrant off-the-shelf demand for solar that is unsupported, unfinanced, not subsidized, but has been a constant. I think we can recall from when we would see solar panels sold in the supermarket, even before regulation. So there's always been an interest or a desire. And I think the latest developments, both in the global economics, where the cost has come down, where we've developed a payment system that is ubiquitous, and where there's a policy environment that has allowed it to grow. But it is not without challenges. And I think maybe Patrick can articulate some of the challenges that we face. There's a lot of inconsistency. We need predictability, but somehow we've managed to get to where we are.
All right, maybe let me add a little bit to what Andrew said. I think that's most, I'm in complete agreement, but let me also just add some context, because we, I think from the GOGLA side, also get a chance to view why is Kenya has seen more progress over the last, let's say, decade than other markets that foreseeably may have larger numbers of people without energy access or larger economies. And I think it's some of just the very basics. One is clear signal of the role of off-grid solutions in the energy access picture for the country, which for one, I know when we look at our members and they're trying to raise money, one of the things investors will look at is to try and evaluate the market size, market opportunity, future prospects of the particular company. And when your country, where the government has clearly signaled that there's a space for your sector, helps in that. And subsequently, it's also, as we talk to some of our members and we look when they're trying to say, okay, I've got a product innovation, where am I going to try and start it out first? Where's the most secure place that they can do that? So one, I think just that clear signal for the role for the sector. I also want to emphasize really just that clear signal that the private sector in itself is not an enemy, or it's included, so that there's no suspicion, or there's no, I could use very many words, but really private sector contributing to some of these sectors in Kenya is not frowned upon, if I can use that word, in Kenya. So which means, there are other countries where still you wonder is the role of the private sector in delivering what could be a public utility, or rather these services, is it fully embraced and is it enabled, or is it just tolerated at that point in time? The other part that I would also stress, and this is not just Kenya per se, but goes back to the EAC and back to 2004, was the decision at the EAC level to provide exemptions from customs and VAT for products for energy access. And when we talk to our members, part of the thing that they realized was, if you're deciding, I've got to sell this product that is going to go to the poorest of poor, who are going to be really hard to serve because they cannot afford my products. If I pick a country where the taxes are going to add 20, 30, 40, 50% of the cost to my product to sell to the person that I'm going to try to sell to, it has, because of that, also influenced why this sector has grown, because the companies see it as one of the least barriers of places to invest in. But I would add, as Andrew has said, that we also do keep seeing missteps. One is just alignment and coherence in the policy framework, the implementation of the programs that, or the sector support programs that are in place. Like, for example, if there's exemptions from customs and duties, just the level of burden and process and red tape, and even just one time you get this interpretation versus the other interpretation. I think too many of the sector spend too many hours in the halls of government just trying to process stuff. And sometimes it takes too long. I know there've been periods where companies' products can be stuck and incur millions in demurrage or storage costs just trying to figure out or get the exemption that should be in place. And really that unpredictability, that one year you get this signal, you're trying to price your product, and before you even price your product and you're trying to start selling, it's changed again. I think those would be some of the things that I think I would point out as some of the missteps that I would say happen in our space. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I just wanted to hear from Chaka about what your experience has been like operating as GridX in the ecosystem, because I think you're more on the ground rather than the policy. So you're experiencing these changes in real time. What has your experience been?
Yeah, I think there are definitely elements of what Patrick and Andrew have said that I'd like to echo. And I think maybe starting from the highest level, our main driver is like cost savings. So our clients are experiencing relatively high prices, and electricity in Kenya is pretty expensive relative to some of the neighbors in the region and globally. So I think we're offering solar solutions, which obviously drive towards sustainability goals. But I would say the primary sort of decision-making metric that our clients are looking at is the tariff and the cost of energy. And solar, because of the pricing sort of conditions in the market, it is cheaper than KPLC in many cases, in most cases, particularly if you have enough scale. And so I think that's one thing where I guess the taxes and the Energy Act sort of policies can really impact things. I mean, I think that there's recently been a capital depreciation allowance, sort of tax improvement for mini grids, which will help the economics of that portion of the industry. In 2019, there was obviously the Energy Act that came out, which allowed, at least in concept, for feed-in tariffs and the potential for net metering, which I think in a commercial and industrial context would be hugely helpful in bringing down the cost of renewable energy, which is effectively if customers, as Professor De Silva was speaking about, have excess power from the solar system that they have, generating on their property, they can feed that back into the grid. Right now, you'd have to go through the process that Professor De Silva probably, spent a lot of hours going through, which was getting an offtake agreement with KPLC and having a special arrangement with them. If they had just sort of a homogeneous process for rolling back your meter by feeding power, excess power into the grid, that would definitely allow for larger scale and more rapid implementation of solar, and that would bring down the cost of renewable energy. I definitely think, on balance, though, Kenya is an incredible sort of study in, I think, entrepreneurialism and innovation, and and renewable energy. So it's really been a pleasure as a guest in this country, as somebody who moved here only 4 years ago. I've just been so impressed with the industry as a whole, and I think Kenya is leading the way in the region in many aspects.
Great, that's a good point. You had so many things I wanted to jump in and ask questions on, but I think we'll start with your mention of SDG goals. So I know renewable energy kind of started as a conversation to achieve some of the goals, including access to energy for everyone. But also one question that has come through in the chat is, for example, women empowerment and economics and social economic development. So Natasha asks, as women are the main users of energy domestically and lenders, wait 1 second. As women, as the main users of energy for domestic use, what is the opportunities from each of your organizations? How are each of you contributing to the gender equality SDG goal in your different areas?
Can I jump in?
Yes, of course, of course.
So now let me tell you one thing. I know the panel knows it, and I think Stephanie, you also know it, but I like mention it. We in Kenya are doing fine, but not that fine, because we have a 3,000 mega of installed capacity. And our colleagues in South Africa, they have 60,000 mega. That is 20 times more energy installed capacity than we have. So it is almost impossible to go from a trade nation, which is Kenya now, to a manufacturing nation, that is the vision for Kenya 2030, without electricity. And we need, it is true, we are doing fine because we went to 80%. We have a lot of geothermal, which is a green energy. Also, we have now wind, and we have solar has begun popping up here and there, Garissa and Eldoret, etc. But it is too little. We need more. We need more. And let me tell you something that will make my point. The GDP of Africa, of all the 54 countries in Africa put together, 1.2 billion people, is $2.6 trillion. Now, the GDP of France, that country, with 66 million people only, is $2.7 trillion. Now, is it because the French people are very intelligent and we Africans are very, very stupid? No, it's because we don't have electricity enough to manufacture, to produce, say, water pumping and metal fabrication and maize milling and food preservation, all those things that are income generating activities to our rural areas. We don't have, you see. So I say we are in dire need to up our game. And then obviously the finance has to be there, because if something is not financially viable, it's not viable at all. We have to go back to the drawing board. Enel Foundation, you know, Enel is the most powerful utility in the planet. They have a stake in 34 different countries. They have a transmission line that can take you to the moon and back 4 times. And in 2019, they bought 19 million connections in Brazil. So São Paulo, Rio de Janeiro, Goiás, and Fortaleza are all powered by Enel from Italy, you know. And the idea is that if they could come here, you know, and with this thing called, that is a provision there in the Energy Act 2019, that auction, let them come here and put 3, 4, 5, 200 mega solar here, there, and elsewhere, and then would be, I think, transformational, and would be reaching the vision 2030 for Kenya. You see, because right now we don't have, and then it is so happens that if we go that line, we will get those 3Ds, which are the 3D revolutions that are happening globally, but mainly in Africa. One, decarbonization. Nobody wants thermal power any longer. You know, they have cut and they are going to go things without carbon, like wind and solar mainly, but also geothermal and like green hydrogen. Then second is the other D, decentralization. Instead of having power generated in Alcaria and going transmission up to Kisumu, you go put power there in Kisumu. So you produce here and you consume here. You did away with the investment capital in transmission and distribution, and you reduce losses. And the technology says you can produce it cheaper than what the utility would charge you. And finally, the third D, decarbonization, decentralization, and digitalization. Everything is becoming smart. We have a smart grid, smart meters, smart city, smart everything. So Internet of Things, artificial intelligence. So let's put all this stuff into the sector of electricity stroke energy, and we will transform not only Kenya, but this continent and the world. Yeah, sorry for talking like a politician, but it's solid. Thank you.
No, it's just great to see how passionate you are about it. And I think what I've taken away from what you said is that we are maybe sprinting even before we walk. And that kind of brings me back to the conversation about access being the most important thing and the thing we should be focusing on. I don't know if you all agree, but if we don't have equal access to energy, then it's kind of hard to start talking about development and all those things when it's not equal opportunities for everybody. Do you agree?
Yes, if I can say something, also touching on the question of gender, which I think for me was one of the pivotal moments in terms of my own commitment in finding access, that there's a very strong gender dimension when it comes to energy. We find that 68% of the energy that is being consumed or thereabouts is wood fuel, primarily collected, harvested, carried by women with no pay. So that raises a fundamental question. Another issue, again, is that without a specific deliberate, intentional policy towards addressing the needs or the use of energy along gender lines, then you end up having the scenario like I'm describing, where when women collect wood fuel for cooking, they're not paid, but when men make charcoal for sale, they get paid. So some of the opportunities that we're looking at here, and I think some people have really been strong on this, is that we need to design the productive use of energy, taking into account these dimensions in terms of both use, ability, interests, focus, and where there can be equity with opportunity. So some of it is by direct quotas. I think Professor Da Silva can be able to tell us like how many women they have trained to install rooftop solar or trained as solar technicians. But some can also be even in the engineering and the design of business models. For example, the business model for dispensing ethanol that doesn't require physical huge amounts of labor to hold that energy that is bought by different people, and still create a natural avenue for those who understand the benefit and can be the best people to promote and sell the solutions. So as we are designing the productive use of energy systems, we are also paying attention to the gender dimension. That's number one. When we look at even access itself, the 9 million people in Kenya who still don't have access either to electricity, and of course there's more people without access to clean fuel, majority of those are women. So how are we going to reach those people with the tools to get them out of what is marginalizing them. Exactly what Professor Da Silva is talking about. So the work is cut out, and I believe that that is something that can be achieved. You can achieve better equity and at the same time be able to enable access, coupled with the ability to pay, because sometimes that is what is missing.
Great. I think you mentioned that it even has to start from the ideation phase. And I'd like to throw it over to Wanji to discuss what she's actually replied in the Q&A section about how the Shell Foundation actually does look out for things like this. So over to you, Wanji.
So I agree and understand what Andrew was saying. So as a foundation, these are challenges that we've experienced and seen over the years, right? So we want to make sure that gender continues to be central to the entrepreneurs that we're working with and the consumers, the last mile consumers who we're trying to solve for. As a foundation, before we disperse capital, we have specific targets. We work with our entrepreneurs with regards to gender. Gender's become it's become an integral part of the core, the thread of the work that we do. So we have targets for the entrepreneurs that we work in with regards to gender, and I think there's two pieces to it. There's to make sure that the organizations that we're working with are very inclusive. And then the other piece is to make sure that the last mile consumers are also thinking about the gender component. We've come to a place where we've started to understand, and where we are right now is we're collecting data with every project or any investment we make. We start to understand some of the challenges Andrew was mentioning. So if a woman, for example, is selling a product, she's going to have a much different set of challenges than if a man is going to do it. And so the research component is we're undertaking research to understand a lot of how our partners are selling some of their products or getting their products to the last mile, and looking at this with a very focused gender lens, so that at the end, at the end of it, we can come back and say, okay, this is what we've learned, this is what we've understood, and how can we curate our learnings on behalf of our entrepreneurs to be more gender specific and to be more gender focused.
Great, thank you so much. I think we could go on with this discussion forever, but unfortunately we have come to our time. I'd like to give each member of the panel just one quick minute to just tell us your parting shot around where you see your organization, but also the industry going in 5 years. And yeah, we'll start with Professor Da Silva.
Okay, anyway, one thing that I would like to do is, Stephanie, you are giving me a platform to say something very beautiful. We have started last year, 2021, engineering in Strathmore, in the electrical and electronics. And then what we did was to make it aligned with the 17 SDGs. So my engineers will be green engineers. And I have 88 students in campus, and about 31 of them are women, which is very nice for the gender beat. So the idea for us is to train these people on green engineering. Then we also, with the support from the UK government, we develop a master's called Sustainable Energy Transition. And we have been helped by UCT in Cape Town to make and we are launching it this coming week. So, and thirdly, with the NEL Foundation support, we created a program called Open Africa Power, by which we have trained 290 Africans, bright, young, and with master's level already, or PhD. So they are from 27 different countries. And those, we hope, are the ones who are going to take our continent to the next level, you see. So that's the thing, BSc, MSc, PhD, and it's not only for engineers, but it's also for IT people, for lawyers because of regulation, and finally, for IT people who are going to do the thing the way we are moving into digitalization. So that is my message. I think it's positive, and I pray we will get people to not only help only Africa, but Africa and the world. Thank you.
Yeah, it's exciting to know that, you know, it's a continent coming together for the future. Wanji?
Sure. I was actually going to volunteer. So, first of all, I think conversations like this are super important. I think, so I've worked in the sector for many years, almost 10 years now. The fact that we did not have a sector and the fact that we have conversations like this, I think is going to allow us, one, to be able to make aware to other people that are in, more traditional sectors, to be aware of clean energy, to be aware of what it is we mean when we say clean energy and the things that it encapsulates. So that's the first thing. The second thing is I'm also super excited to see conversations like this, and I'd love to see more women in the fold. So Professor's spoken about the trainings that they're doing, which is really encouraging to hear. I'd love to see more women in the sector. As you can see, the panel doesn't have as many women as we'd like it to. So I look forward to sessions where we have more women in the sector, more women in panels, so that young girls can also understand that this is a sector, it is viable, it's got promise, it's sustainable, and all those nice things. So that's personally. With regards to what I see with regard about financing in the sector, so there's a couple of things, and I think I touched on it a bit earlier. I see climate finance coming in, a lot more climate financing coming into the sector. I think there's going to be a lot more heavier focus on that side, on that front. I've seen it with a couple of other funders in the space. I've seen it with governments and the pledges and the commitments that they're making, etc. The second piece I am looking forward to seeing more of is I think I see a lot more funding going into larger tiers of energy requirements. I think there's a bit more of a shift from tier 1 and 2 energy sources into much bigger, larger distributed sources of energy, and that's also really good to see. I think I would love to see more collaboration. I'd love to see more concessional financing, from different sources. I'd really like to see instruments that, and we've seen a couple of this, but I'd like to see more instruments that are blending public and private capital. And then lastly, and this is something that we're also doing as the foundation, is I'm looking forward to having more instruments curated specific to the market, driven by data. I'll just give you an example here. So we recently announced an investment with Nithio, and Nithio is an AI-enabled energy financing platform. They directly finance clean energy companies in Africa. So what's interesting here is Nithio's lending is powered by its unique risk analytics engine, which leverages geospatial data, consumer repayment data, AI, and financial modeling to standardize credit risk. And so I see a lot more instruments curated specific to the markets that they focus on and curated specific to the sector that we're working in. Thanks.
Oh, that's great. I'm glad you touched on the recent project, because I was reading about it and it's very interesting how you're combining data to provide accessibility for everyone. So thank you so much. Andrew, would you like to share a bit more about where you see the industry going?
Yes, thank you. First of all, a disclaimer that projecting into the future was a thing that people did until 2020. Nobody saw that coming. Well, at least we didn't see it coming the way it did. But that said, I see a combination of what Wanji and Professor have just touched on. I see a lot more of decentralized autonomous systems. I see the marriage of energy with data and finance. I see the uptake of advantages that Africa has, and that is the cheapest source of electricity generation from rooftop solar. I see innovation coming in, and we're already seeing things like maize mills that run purely on solar. And I see when all of these are combined, when you've married data, you have combined finance, you have combined skills and training, then I see us starting to tap into markets. Import substitution, export. Kenya is an importer, net importer. We import more food than we export. Our agricultural imports are worth more than our petroleum imports, yet we have all the facilities here. So I see the application of this knowledge and the advantage that we have in terms of being able to have 2,440 hours of peak solar along the equator, that when coupled into a productive system, then I see an economic advantage that could tip future white label manufacturing to start looking seriously at Africa. And with the innovation that this brings, I see all of this coming out as the fifth industrial revolution. And that is what my commitment is, to be instrumental in making this happen. And I also see the beginning of the transition to electric mobility powered by primarily solar and renewable electricity happening in the next 4 to 5 years.
Great. I think you're hinting at our next discussion, so I won't tell you which part, but thank you so much. Patrick?
Yes, I think the Andrews, Wanji, and Professor Da Silva, I think, have covered quite a bit of it. I think I'll go back to what happened at COP26, and especially the engagement of the African countries and the developing countries at the COP26. It's a reality. Here we are in January in Kenya, and we are going through significant storms, right? Climate change is there, and you know, we have to deal with what's causing that climate change. However, at the same time, when you look at the position of most developing countries, they're in a situation where they don't have enough power. They've got very many people who don't have energy or access to the basic lighting. So what that means is, or the reality of these countries is, at the time when everybody is being told scale up, scale down, reduce emissions and all that, these countries, just for their basic development, do need to be actually increasing the level of energy in their countries and consumption, and have to generate that energy. So we, I think, as a sector, especially when we look at solar and the renewable and off-grid, we know we need to bring energy to these communities, and we need to do it in a climate smart manner. And this energy it cannot only be at light or very basic level. It needs to be to the level that it can actually allow them to be able to undertake economic use of that energy. So whatever it is, processing, all that good stuff. So I think we are going to see more growth, more investment in our space. I think we are going to see push and you know, balancing cost by technology innovation, really to also try and make it as climate smart as possible. And what will win, how it will develop, I think some of this is unknown, but I think for now, being where we are in Kenya and Africa, we still need to see growth in our sector. And the question is, are we going to adopt a climate smart approach to delivering that? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Last but not least, Choka, where do you see GridX and the industry going in the next 5 years?
So I think Patrick and Wanji touched on a couple things that I'd like to sort of synthesize as it aligns with my views, in that I do think that there's lots of climate smart capital coming into the space, and I think that investors are going to largely dictate the future of the energy industry needs to be steered in a sustainable direction, and the economics of renewable energy also incentivize that. Solar and wind are the cheapest forms of power generation available, and so I think as battery storage technology and prices become more and more attractive, that's going to play a huge role moving forward. And so my view is that the private sector will probably become more and more involved in the overall energy space in the region in Kenya. I think the commercial viability element is a hugely important thing, in my opinion, to create a sort of a long-term resilient and durable solution. You need it to be economically sensible, and so I think we're getting to a point now in a lot of areas of the renewable energy space where there are commercially viable solutions, and so those will naturally scale. And so I think then the real space to focus on is to continue to be innovative, whether it's in your financing structures as the NIFIO sort of approach, or whether it's in the way you think about different solutions in this space, and let's not try to box ourselves into, the one size fits all, or what's been done in the past must work here, or what's been done somewhere else in the world must be the way that the sector develops. I think there's a huge amount of space and opportunity for innovation, and in the same way that we saw, Safaricom with M-Pesa leapfrogging a lot of the fintech developments globally. I think renewable energy has an opportunity to do that in Kenya as well, and particularly in the distributed energy space, where people are really forward thinking here. So yeah, I think a very positive outlook in my opinion for the future. And yeah, thanks so much for having us, Stephanie.
Thank you. Once again, thank you so much to our panel and to you, our attendees, for joining us for the first edition of the Future of Energy series. Our next one will be talking to a few innovators in the space who are actually developing solutions for inclusive development, but also just forwarding our thought process on how we think about energy consumption. Please do stay tuned for that. We'll be sharing more information shortly. Additionally, we'll also be sharing information from our panel with you via email so that you can reach them or reach their organizations to find out more about what they do, the projects they're working on, and how to get in touch with each and every one of them. Thank you so much to everybody. I know we're over time, but the conversation was interesting, and I hope you learned a lot as much as I did. Please do stay tuned, and if you have any questions from us or the panel, please do send them through, and I'll get them back to you as soon as I can. So once again, thank you so much. Have a lovely evening, everybody.